Yeah,
I
we
would
don't
just
have
make sure everybody is aware at the beginning that the meetings are being recorded.
right. I don't think we have a quorum yet either.
Yeah, I
What's
don't.
Seven, actually
quorum,
we
Madam
do.
Chair? 7-5?
Yeah, we do now, yes.
Okay.
Hi, Claus, how are you?
It's actually 6 is a quorum because there's 11 of you.
Good, how are
Yeah,
you?
and it's 7 of us here, so we're good. Oh, no, it's 6, I'm sorry. So Kyle, you're up here twice. And we can't hear you talking again.
You hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna see how I
Okay,
can-
Nico's here. Okay, great. All righty. I'm gonna wait for Estella to come back.
I apologize. It asked for something different, so I'm still in my office. But it was very surprising that it did not ask for just to click it. So
It's okay.
And I have
All is well.
returned.
All right. So let's see. I think that's the. So Tucker, can you restate now that everyone is here regarding the minutes from the last meeting and the fact that they were recorded and what that procedure are? Is that Tucker or is that John that just gave us those instructions? Now that we have everyone here and we are recording.
That was me. So there's a provision in the Open Meetings Act, I believe, that says if the meeting is recorded and notice is given of the recording and that recording is posted on the website, that actually operates in lieu of meeting minutes. So we don't have to approve written minutes. Tucker doesn't have to prepare them. We don't have to vote on them or approve them because the whole meeting is posted.
Wonderful. Thank you. With that, I'd like to go ahead and officially open up the meeting. Thank you for those who are in attendance. We have with us, I'm sorry?
Can I ask about the minutes? I understand that we are fulfilling our obligation with that, but I find it not very practical for us to have only minutes that are the full recording instead of having really the key points summarized like it would be normally done with minutes.
That's up to you all. You can certainly do it. You're just not required to.
Yeah, right.
So what are you asking,
mean-
Claus? You want something in writing?
I think that normal meeting minutes would be very helpful for us to recall what was discussed so that we don't have to listen to the entire recording.
And Madam Chair, I would agree with Claus on that matter. It would be good to have some bullets, and I presume that the county staff members here can make that happen.
Is that possible, Tucker? Or is that something we're going to have to eventually take?
I didn't catch the second part of your question. First part is that's no problem. And then I think what I heard on the second part is that that's something the board would have to eventually take. I think that, overall, when the board hires its own staff, right?
Right.
You would take many functions, right? If not all.
Right.
Madam Chair, Tucker, this question is for you. Does WebEx have any type of AI recording capability or a transcription, transcribing functionality?
Yes. Yes, that makes my job a bit easier. Yes.
Okay, I would surely recommend that then.
But that's just as bad as the recordings.
Well, in either case, we're going to have someone be responsible for taking those minutes, whether they're recorded by hand, by video, by AI, someone on the board is going to have to take that role on. Claus, do you want to take that role?
Yeah, I can do that, but I understood Tucker to say that right now staff could do that. Is that not correct, Tucker?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Happy to take notes and in addition to the.
You're going in and out, Tucker. I don't know if that's me or if everyone else is having
No,
that issue.
that's for
I'm,
all.
I'm getting I'm getting that as well.
That was
Okay.
the same as last time. Tucker needs a headphone.
I find my head, but yes was the answer. Did that come
Okay.
through? Okay.
Yes, it did. Thank you, Tucker. Okay. Does anyone have I'm on a laptop since I'm out of town. Does anyone have the minutes in front of, I'm sorry, not the minutes, the agenda in front of them as to, we talked about the minutes. We'll approve them at the next meeting. And Tucker, will you have an opportunity to have them written out by the time we have our next meeting and then we can approve them at that point?
Yes, I can do that.
Okay. So we'll hold off on approving the minutes from our last meeting that we had. Okay. And Estella, you said you had your hand raised? That you had the agenda?
Yes, you had asked the question in terms of the agenda for today, and there were just I was just going to share those with you. It's a short agenda, so I presume we've done the welcome and introductions. The purpose of
Not
this
yet.
meeting. Okay.
So let's stop. Thank you.
Okay.
Because
You're
we
welcome.
do have some new people on the call. And with that, thank you very much. I'd like to welcome Delegate Jennifer White Holland. She had her face on there for a second. And there you are. We had your assistant, I'm going to say that for lack of a better word, last week. And thank you very much for having that person as a part of our meeting. We appreciate that. Jennifer, if you can, for those who may not know, you just indicate your district and, a little bit about yourself, please.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'm Delegate Jennifer White Holland. I have the pleasure of representing the 10th Legislative District. And again, and I'm so very pleased to have this redevelopment authority move forward. You may remember me from our interview process, but just wanted to hop in very briefly, as I have other activities and meetings to attend to, but just wanted to just give greetings and say thank you for your service in helping to move our community forward. So thank you for the time and opportunity.
We thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we also have Mr. Samir is on. Samir, is there anything you'd like to say to us today? And he took his camera off just that quick. Samir, can you hear us?
I can. I literally just got taken off, but I'm back now. So
okay. Is there anything you would like to say to us tonight?
No, nothing to kick it off. Just looking forward to continuing the progress, and glad to see this board coming together and starting to do the hard work.
Wonderful. Thank you so very much. Madam Delegate White Holland, it is our pleasure to not just introduce, well, you've met the board members before. Last meeting, we had an election of the chair and the vice chair. Miss Estella Alexander is our vice chair. And I am the chair of the organization, at least for the moment. One of the things we want to do is to talk that there's a budget that we need to discuss because it's due back to the county by the 15th of April. And that's the reason for having this additional meeting tonight, so that we can at least make a little bit of headway. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that so that it's out of the way before we have our next meeting on April 30th. And then, so before I go into that any further, Stella, what was after the introductions and everything?
So the next item on the agenda is old business, and there are two elements under that. Letter A is committee discussion, and then letter B is budget discussion.
So thank you. So for the committee discussion, and just talking through to some of the board members here and some of our stakeholders, because of the time frame that we have to work with, especially with the budget, I'm asking if there's anyone here of the board members that is willing to be, and there's three categories that I'm looking at. We need a chair, a committee chair for the budget. We need a committee chair for what I'm going to call recruitment, and that would be for the ED and possibly an additional staff person. And then the third committee chair would be, I would call it acquisition and what do we call it, Tucker? Property and acquisitions, I think is what it was.
I think that's right.
what it was.
I mean, yeah.
But it was,
Yeah.
and that is because of the conversations that came out of the last meeting. There's several moving parts, and two of them have deadlines, and the other one doesn't, but it tends to be a priority, and that's around the properties that we may or may not have control over, things of that nature. However, because of the timeline, we need to work on the budget, and that's why I'm asking for a committee chair and people who want to be on that committee. And then we need to work on the recruitment of the executive director. While the county has given us an outline of what that description is, excuse me, there's more to it. And then the people on the recruitment side need to talk to the people on the budget committee side, because you need to determine what's the salary going to be, the compensation and everything that goes around it. And I think it would be prudent, as opposed to all of us having this conversation. I see your hand. Have all of us having these conversations, because some of us get into the weeds. If we could just have a committee that deals with budget, that deals with recruitment, and be able to bring some continuity, and then bring it back to the board, so that we then can all discuss and vote on what the committee came up with. Again, recruitment will have to talk to budget committee, because to determine what the salary is going to be as part of the operation expenses, the fringe benefits, things of that nature. Do we hire just an ED or an ED plus one staff? What does that look like? And so I'm asking again for chairs of people who are willing to take on that role, and then people who are willing to be on that committee of either one of those three committees. Yes, Claus, your question.
My question is, because all the three committees are, as you describe it, interconnected, and whether it is possible to exchange dollars between the capital and the operations monies that are set aside for us. And I would call the third committee not only acquisition, but also planning, because I imagine we would hire some consultant to create a plan first. But obviously, the demands for the staff are depending on what we are doing, and so the more we can do, the more staff we need, and the less we can do, the less staff. So it seems like it would be very helpful if we could sort of dynamically shift the money around, and maybe start with part-time staff instead of full-time staff until we have a clearer pathway.
I'm going to pivot to either Tucker or Samir in reference to how that money was allocated, because I believe it came from it was, in a pot for a certain reason.
Yeah. So my understanding is both tranches of money are coming from the state and are prescribed for specific purposes, i.e. capital and or operating. And the grants are identified as such for that. So the only way, and we can certainly look into it, I'll preface that before I give you like a firm answer, but the only way in my estimation that you could make that adjustment is going back to the legislative body and asking them to make the money more flexible, or to allow that fungibility.
Thank you, Samir. And at this point, I would ask that we don't because we have to submit this budget by the 15th. So I would ask that we just leave it well enough alone. And because we're really just getting started. Yes, Estella.
Madam Chair, I would just offer from my experience, the capital budget and the operating budget are not interchangeable sources of funds. I think that's what has been said politely. I think that, it can be confirmed, but I don't believe they're interchangeable. But I have a question regarding the staff personnel committee, if you will. Will that committee, and I guess this goes to Tucker and the county staff, will that committee at some point have access to anyone in the county's Office of Human Resources? Because I'm sure that there are guidelines set regarding salaries and regarding ranges for salary and qualifications for certain salary. So is that information included in the draft job description to this point that I might have missed, or is there a comment that one can offer at this point?
Yeah, I can take a stab at that. I mean, we can look into it, but my understanding is that the authority is a separate entity. So it's,
Okay.
The class and comp would be separate, right, from county HR, and that'd be a decision of this entity of the authority. That said, we can look into it, and then also, happy to support however appropriate, but I think that there's a division, there.
And that's good to know, Madam Chair, if I could just offer, that's good to know. It is just a point of reference that may help in the process. If we may use that information, obviously what I'm understanding is that we don't have to follow those specific guidelines, but it may be helpful.
Yeah, and
Sam, go ahead. Hold
yeah,
on a second. Samir.
thank you. Just so I understand the request, you're obviously not bound by county HR, and Tucker might have hit this, but I dropped off for another 30 seconds. But you're looking for something that would just advise in terms of what we might compensate a position of like a similar caliber within the county. Is that basically it? Okay, yeah.
The short answer is yes.
Help with that, yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Thank you. And then we would still go through Tucker and he would put us in touch with the right resources. Wonderful. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then, Madam Vice Chair, was that you had another question, or was that it?
That was it. I just wanted to understand the resource, particularly for that particular committee.
Okay. And then David, you had your hand raised.
I was going to speak to capital budget versus the operating budget. And Madam Chair, I believe that DeAndre, Ms. Walker said we had to have it to about April the 11th, not the 15th. So, because she doesn't want to turn it in on the day it's due to her, to the county executive.
You're right. I was sorry. I was thinking about taxes. Sorry.
Okay.
And actually the 11th, if I'm not mistaken, is that a Saturday or is that a Friday?
It's a Friday.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's
okay,
the Friday
so
right before that weekend. That's right.
Okay, so it gives us literally 12 days from today. Okay, to get that done. So with that, is there anyone here of the board members that is open to being the chair of the budget committee? Okay. And then I know you raised your hand.
Madam Chair, Kyle McNair, I raised my hand for a budget committee, either to lead or to be a part of, whichever way you see fit.
Which one? It's a responsibility. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Estella, before I say anything.
No. I was going to join my colleague and simply say, Madam Chair, I'd like to be a part of the recruitment staff committee.
Okay. So, Kyle, you're willing to lead the budget committee. Am I understanding that correctly? Okay.
Right. Yes. Or just be a part of it, whichever way you see fit.
Okay.
I'm
And
prepared for both.
okay. We're gonna go budget first. Is there anyone else that would like to be on the budget committee or willing to chair it? Wendy?
I would like to
willing
be
to
a
serve.
part of the budget committee.
I'm sorry, Wendy, say that
I would
again.
like to be a part of the budget committee. Yes.
Okay. And then there was another voice I heard.
It was Jason. I was willing to serve
Jason.
on the budget committee, but I didn't know what your intention was, if there was a min or a max to the committee.
Number of people.
Actually, I
Yeah.
would like, and forgive me, I'm in the hotel room and the fire alarm's going off. We want everyone to be on at least one committee. I'm hoping that everyone will serve on a committee. So there's three. The two biggest ones are budget and the recruitment, and then the last one would be property and acquisitions. So Jason, I have, it's fine. And if you want to be on more than one committee, that's fine too. So I have Jason as well. Is there anyone else that would like to be budget? Okay, next one would be, I'm calling it recruitment until someone can come up with a better term. Anyone that would like to, oh, I see a hand, Wendy.
Madam Chair, I would love to chair the recruitment committee.
Thank you. Michael, I see your hand.
Yeah, I'll just serve on it. I don't want to chair it. I'll work for Wendy.
Nico?
Madam Chair, I'd love to sit on that committee and support Wendy in that.
Wonderful. Awesome.
And Madam Chair, Stella would like to be on that committee as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
I got you for both. Yep. Did I see another hand someplace else? Okay. All righty. And then the last committee would be property and acquisition. And what this is, I read through the charter, and one of the things, Tucker, if we can get a copy of the county code, that section 26, because it kept referring back to the county code section 26. And there was also a section in there around working with the economic development office, or it was, but whatever, I'll put it in an email, and I'll put everybody in that email requesting exactly what it was. But if you read through the fully executed charter resolution, it refers back to the county code. So we need to know what's in that county code in that section, because it talks about that basically the county will probably take the lead on a lot of the property, and especially around the whole eminent domain. We don't have the authority to deal with eminent domain. The county does. It also talked about there was in the third reader from the state legislative body. It also talked about some restrictions that the authority could and could not do. I would ask that you all read that a couple of times, and there were even a couple of things I'm like, okay, I need to get a little clarification. So before we talk about purchasing property, what's the status of property, we're in no position to talk to the Social Security Administration or anything. Then I believe, and Samir, correct me if I'm wrong, the county has already taken the lead on those. They know what's available and what's not. And then also, I'm gonna let you comment to that, Samir. And then also Tucker is planning to have the planning department come to our meeting April 30th. So before someone decides to be a chair, I would like Samir to comment, as well as Tucker, about what that entails and around property and acquisition.
So yeah, I mean, look, we have some resources that help us understand as a county what properties are available. Typically, if a property is available, they'll also hire a listing agent, and they'll promote it. And we do have, at least through our real estate compliance office, we have some broker support that assists us when we're trying to acquire property strategically. So we have some resources there. It's not particularly robust, if I'm being honest, but we do have some capability there. I guess, Carla, your question more specifically is, to what level will the county support
No,
Yeah,
I'm
I'm just
sorry,
trying to.
not so much support, but where you are now, you're probably already in conversations with certain entities within the catchment area. And so before we talk about what we need to find out where the county is and what positions they're taking, we need to
Yeah.
learn before we go outside, we need to learn what the county is doing first and then get an understanding before we go.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, from a strict acquisition perspective, the majority of our acquisition discussions as a county are focused in two areas. One is Security Square, and secondly is Woodlawn Village. Um, and so those are kind of the areas very broadly that we're focused on. I want to be careful about how much I disclose about active negotiations in a public setting, and so maybe there's another way where we could get into more detail about those discussions, but those are kind of the two general areas. Of course, we made, an acquisition on the Liberty Road corridor at 8212, the former Ollie's and Shoppers that were looking at a combined library and rec center. But we don't have, there's not very specific and targeted active property acquisition discussions on Liberty Road right now. So it's really just kind of those two areas within the catchment area.
Samir, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Does the county in this catchment area, are there any active lease agreements?
Trying to think. That's a good question. I mean, so obviously we have different county assets within the catchment area. There's an existing Randallstown Library, community center. In terms of leases, off the top of my head, I can't think of an active county lease.
Okay.
But that's something we can follow up on. I can
Okay.
do some research on that. There's just a lot of, obviously it's a county government, so we have a lot of
Understood.
different departments that keep property and maintain it for different purposes. So we can look into that.
Okay.
Estella, what were you going to say?
No, I'm just listening. No, I don't have any comments at this moment. Thank you.
I'm sorry if you hear this in the back. With the planning department meeting with us on the 30th, Tucker, can you speak a little bit more to that? I just want us to make sure that we know what is going on before we move forward. Thank you.
Sure. So I had spoken to Director Lafferty about presenting to the authority at the next meeting on April 30th to share the Department of Planning's perspective on really the catchment area at large. So that includes, the sort of sites of interest or targeted sites Samir mentioned, 8212, Liberty Road, Woodlawn Village, Security Square Mall, and then, an overview of the master plan for the county and how that applies to the catchment area. And then I think, board members have mentioned, an interest in demographic and economic data. I think, the planning department will have some of that. I think there will be additional requests I would anticipate following that presentation, but that's sort of a broad overview of what I had spoken to Director Lafferty about presenting at the next meeting.
Thank you very much. David, you had your hand up for a while.
When will we hear from Redgate? Is that a part of the planning's presentation or is that a different meeting?
Sure, I can take that. We had planned for that to be separate, so it would be, following. I think there's also been discussion about hearing from Economic and Workforce Development, who I think would have more, detailed economic data. But I think that's a decision of the board of, what requests for informational briefings you make, in what order, when, that sort of thing.
The reason I'm asking is because, we don't want to duplicate what they've already done, and they paid for it already, so it's available to us, and that would be very helpful as we begin. Good planning starts with good information. They probably have some good information for us right now that we can use, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel where we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Okay.
Now, David, can you tell me, Redgate, is that a consulting company? What is Redgate?
I'll let Samir and and Tucker explained, but to understand they did the plan for visioning for Security Mall.
So, and I can clarify, it's actually, Redgate did not do the visioning plan for Security Square Mall. The visioning process was Air St. Gross, and
Okay.
the materials that were prepared as part of that visioning process are available on the website that they prepared. Redgate has been contracted to take us from basically through an implementation framework, getting us from the point of acquiring property, getting us to a point where we're at a critical mass where we think there's some marketability to the property that we have acquired at Security Square, and ultimately helping us through solicitation process to get that property onto the market through an RFP. The thing that I'm going to say to caution everybody about our arrangement with Redgate is right now we're in the middle of that work, and that work is proprietary. So it is very tricky to share information right now. And so if I'm being I'm not being intentionally cryptic about this information. And the best example I can give you is the county acquired the Macy's building and associated pad sites. We actually closed on those properties back in early January. But we went through a process and we weren't able to actually publicize the contract of sale, which got executed back in June, because as part of that negotiation, Macy's was pretty specific about having kind of confidentiality built around it. Right. It's not uncommon, and their interests were related to their national closure plan, and they had already intended to close that store, and we were able to fortunately get involved and control the property. But there are things like that that prevent me from sharing information that might be subject to active negotiation. So just want to throw that caveat.
Understood, and we appreciate that. Thank you. Claus?
Yeah, it did follow the master planning process a bit, and the area, our catchment area, had, I think, I'm not looking at the plan right now, but 3 development nodes, and one of them is Security Square Mall. When Lafferty is going to present to us, he could then elaborate a little bit how these development nodes were defined and what demographic or data-based decisions, or where the data are that led to the decision to make them development nodes. And Security Square Mall is a good example for us, not that that is our activity area necessarily, but what they did is that they first created a vision plan and then an implementation plan. And I think that that's what we need generally, because most of the area that we cover doesn't have really a current planning documents, other than that the master plan designed these nodes. The small area plans for Woodlawn and for Liberty Road corridor and so on, they are all pretty old. And so that always goes back to before we do any acquisition, we need to have a better sense as to where are the real hotspots and what
absolutely. Yes. And that's the purpose for having a chair to for a committee chair, is to review what we'll all hear what planning has, and then the committee can take and be more finite with what's going on, and people who have interest in that, to bring that back to the larger group, because we're dealing with so much in a certain time frame. So thank you, Claus, for that. And then Jason, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was trying to find the mute button. Madam Chair, I'm actually with this presentation on the 30th. One thing I'm interested to hear is when has the community that's in the catchment area has kind of spoken to what they want. I'm interested to gain more information about things that they want to see, and what how planning has, taken that input as a part of their plans, or whatever the case may be. But I'm looking to get information to that. I don't know if that's the right department, if it's another department within county. Maybe that's the question I'm asking.
You're right. It would be planning. And Tucker, I'm sure you'll take that information back to Mr. Lafferty so he can address that when he meets with us. And then David, did you still have your hand up for another question, or is that from before?
No, I took it down and put it back up and said I've worked on the acquisitions, assessment and acquisition.
Okay, you would like to work on that?
Yes.
Okay, Jason?
Oh, I'm sorry, my hands. I'm so used to Teams.
Okay, anybody want to be chair of that committee?
I would be willing to serve or be chair, whatever.
Anyone else wants to be on a committee or serve? We have David and we have Claus.
I'm interested to be a part of that committee.
Jason, okay.
Yep.
Nico, which can you unmute and tell me what capacity?
Yeah, just serve on that committee.
Okay. Wonderful. All right, so Claus, looks like you're going to chair that committee. I can't imagine why you wouldn't want to. So thank you, everyone. And I believe everyone here has picked a committee. We have a couple people who have not been able to join us tonight. Tucker, if you don't mind, you and I can, and Estella, if we, the three of us circle with the other members to make sure that they are on a committee.
Okay.
And so the other piece is, you as the committee chairs have to determine when you all want to meet with your committee. And then let us know, to let Tucker, Estella, and myself know when you're going to meet. Estella, I think you're on two of the committees anyway, but when you're going to meet, and then and then I guess if you're going to do WebEx, you have to go through Tucker to make sure and let him know. Make sure we get that done, especially at who reminded me by the 11th. You know, we've got to get everything, you know, wrapped up in a bow by the 11th. Am I missing anything? Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chair, I understand April the 11th pertains specifically to the budget submission to the county. Does that date also pertain to the recruitment committee, or does it not?
It's tied to it because of the salary compensation.
Okay.
One of the things when we had our first meeting and they said they wanted to hire somebody by May, we were like, that's not going to happen. But I think at minimum, if we could at least have maybe something posted online and by May, I think that's doable because they've given us a framework to work with. Yeah.
Okay.
And then even if, and correct me if I'm wrong, Wendy, whoever, even if you have a ballpark figure of what that compensation looks like, because we really don't know what benefits and everything are going to be, but we probably could get an idea of what a benefit package would look like.
Sure. Yeah, we can get there. I have a quick question.
Sure, ma'am.
For Jonathan, remind us again what the quorum number is so that we don't violate the Open Meetings Act.
The quorum number is 6, so it's a majority of the 11 voting members.
Thank you.
And I did just want to say to the last point, I'm looking at the code section now on the operating budget, and it says following April 15th of each year, but 1 month before the start of the next fiscal year, the authority shall prepare and submit to the county executive a proposed operating budget for the next fiscal year.
We just knew that this year, as someone reminded us, Ms. Walker wanted it by the 11th. So, and I think that's probably why I got, because I was reading through the charter and everything about that. Okay, I see a couple hands up, but yes, Samir, I'm sorry.
Clarify on that. So I think what she needed by the 11th was just if there, and preferably before the 11th, if there was a request for additional funding beyond the $750,000 in operating that you guys have for the next fiscal year, that's what we would need for our budget process. But to John's point, the actual like provision of a budget for for county like record keeping purposes, that can follow the same deadline that's in the bylaws.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Now, Jason, I thought unless you put your hand back down, but I saw your hand up.
I did have my hand up, and I did take it down. I just have concerns regarding the budget request. I remember Ms. Walker particularly speaking about providing justification that justification was going to have to be pretty solid for that request. Given just where we are, I mean, in 2 weeks, we really want to have a strong idea about what it is we're trying to request. But I guess that'll be in the committee, and those deliberations will be had. But that's my primary concern. That you, Kyle.
Yes, that's you and Miss Wendy, and who else was on that committee? Stella and Michael. Yes, yes, Vice Chair Stella.
Madam Chair, I would just ask if the county could, and I know that the chair of this budget committee will be thinking about this as well, if there is a format that could be forwarded to the committee in preparation for the meeting. There's typically a formatted process. So if we have that, that would save us, that would also help in ensuring that we use our time efficiently.
I think we can find something. I mean, I don't think it has to be a ton, at least, you know, especially like Deanna and I, of course, are aware of you know, the timeline on this. And again, I just want to be clear, like, you guys have a budget for next year. This would just be additive on top of that, because we'd have to put it in our budget for the following year. But you do have 750,000 in operating, of course, the 500 in capital. But yes, but we can get you something this summer to help them.
Okay, and one more question, Madam Chair, just to be clear, is there within the budget that exists, we know what operating budgets will entail, but is there any information that would help the committee regarding the allocation for the capital budget that's already been made?
Tucker or Samir, either one.
So just help me understand the question again. So when you say information,
my question is just very simple. Is there any additional information that would explain the intent of the capital budget allocation that's in place now? Is there anything other than this? Is there anything else other than its labeling as capital budget? Is there any intended use general description that was prepared as part of the adoption of that?
I think we can find the language behind that $500,000, but typically, you know, these are capital grants that come from the state. You know, a lot of them look the same, and it's like planning, acquisition, design. It's like a laundry list. So these are typically worded in a way that's meant to be as broad as possible. That's what I suspect this one is, but I haven't looked at it in a minute. So, but we can find it.
That would be great to have, again, just to help the committee given its deadline. Thank you.
Right.
Okay, Claus, you're next.
Yeah, I have another budget question. These two amounts that we have and that are not fungible, do they have to be spent in the budget year, or do they carry over into the next? We should consider also part-time staffing and gliding into additional staffing over time. And so that would be a relevant question maybe in that context, whether this can carry over into the next budget year or whether it's realistic and has to be spent.
Good question.
I believe that they carry over. I think they actually carried over from, they've already carried over a year, I believe. But I'll confirm that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, my understanding is that they carry over as well, but we can just make extra sure that that's the case.
David?
I thought we were moving into the discussion about the ED position, and I was going to sign off because I'm interested and I want to recuse myself from any discussion on that.
Okay. Before you do that, Kyle, were you going to say something?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. So as far as carryover of operation and capital funding year to year, is there a limit? Is it a 3-year or is it a 1 year? And I guess it goes to Tucker or Samir.
You're
Sorry,
you're
Tom.
talking about the length of the carryover.
Yes.
I don't know that there's anything prescribed on in terms of the limit of the carryover, and so like the best way I can describe this is, this is a grant from the state to this entity, and so like if this entity were like a county department, then you'd have a year basically like on the operating side, and then the money would go back into the general fund. But it's not, and so there's an accounting that's typically required, and I think that's described, and John referenced that in the bylaws and probably in the legislation as well. But I don't think it slides back. Typically, capital grants on the state side would revert in 7 years. But like I think we can do some work just to like firmly answer those questions. But that's generally how I understand this.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, David, you made the comment regarding wanting to recuse yourself if we were going to talk about the ED position.
It's kind of like, I kind of want, when that's coming up, Madam Chair, it's like, Dave, please excuse yourself. I don't want to be, I know it could come up during this discussion. I didn't want to, have a problem.
Understood. With that, I'm flipping back over my notes because you were only interested in property and acquisition. Okay.
Right.
So,
Right.
Tucker, how do we manage this, that we have a board member that wants to be considered for the executive director position? Can you help us out with that, please?
So I can comment on that.
Thank you, John. Yeah.
My advice would be for Mr. Green to sign off on, or at least temporarily leave the meeting. It's not necessarily a requirement, but it's a little bit of a gray area. Certainly cannot vote on any matter concerning the ED position that comes up, and really can't participate in those discussions. Like I said, you're not required to leave, and if it's a Zoom meeting, maybe that's a little different, but my advice would be to actually leave the room if we're going to have a separate discussion on that. Now, if it just sort of comes up in passing, I think you're fine. Like if you're sitting here in the meeting and somebody mentions something, I wouldn't, that's not a big, but can't vote on anything.
Okay. I just didn't want to avoid any appearance that, that I hear something or see something. I certainly won't say anything that I shouldn't at that, until that decision is made.
Claus, were you going to say something before David signs off, or is it after he signs off?
No, I wanted to just clarify, and I think it's important for David to understand also whether it is even possible to be a board member and the executive director. My understanding is that it's an either or.
Oh, it's my understand. I mean, it's my desire to be an executive director, but if I'm not selected, I would like to remain a board member. So I don't want to say I need to stop being a board member in order to be considered for the executive director.
From a legal standpoint, that's fine, and that's understandable.
Okay, who said that?
That's John.
The lawyer, John.
Okay.
There's nothing requiring you to resign before your decision has been made, so you can.
Okay.
If you are selected, then at that point you can resign and should resign.
And if he isn't selected, then he stays. So, but how does that work when we're having conversations between now and whenever that time is? Because they're, the conversations tend to intertwine. We'll try not to, but how do we manage that?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a little messy. I think my advice would be to, whenever you're intending to talk about the executive director position, give a heads up and allow Mr. Green an opportunity to either log off the meeting if it's WebEx or actually leave the room if it's an in-person meeting.
I actually think it may have to be both budget and executive director because he's running for a position and would know what the budget looks like that other candidates from the outside would not either. And that's my concern as well. There's still.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
agree with you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I just had to say this. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Okay.
What
Okay.
you just stated.
Maybe
Claus,
I'll
you
come.
had your hand up as well.
No, this was the old hand. I tried to take it down. Is it not down?
It's down now, yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask the board. I think this is something maybe board members we should vote on as to how we should move forward with Mr. Green. Well, wait a minute. Do we have a forum if Mr. Green is not voting as to how we manage going forward until that decision is made? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have enough. Yes, Nico, you wanted to say something? You got to come off mute. Yeah.
Do you want me to leave? You want me to leave while you do that? And you could, I can leave. So
I don't know. It depends on what Nico wants to say. He may want you to hear what he's going to say.
Yeah, no, I do. I think that it creates an uncertainty in a convoluted space that as this board is getting together, that now we have a board member saying that they are vying for a job that we're helping to create. And I think to Madam Chair's point, from the perspective of this new board looking to find that person that we need to decide, and I think that would be with the Madam Chair and the new chair of that committee to look at having a packet of information that would include the budget and other information to ensure that anyone who's applying for that position would have the same opportunities as Dave would to avoid that and be intentional about a conversation that would exclude Dave from that subcommittee. And so if there are updates that would be given, that may be the opportunity, Madam Chair, that we would exclude Dave from that.
So are you saying keep him on, but exclude him, or just exclude him until the process is over?
Sure. I think when we start talking about the specificity of the position, what that entails, what that salary range looks like, I think that would be up to you and the sub chair to talk about that. But when we talk about specificity of that, I think that would be something we should isolate.
Okay, Michael had to drop off. Madam Vice Chair, you were indicating, well, I think I want to put it to a vote because I don't want this to belabor any longer. I would like to put this to a vote with the board members.
I am going to leave. I am going to leave even for this vote because you still have a quorum, right?
Yes, we do.
And I can't vote anyway. So
I will ask
if this is the last thing on the agenda, I'll see you all next time. If not, I'm stand by. I can shut down. You can call my cell phone. I'll jump back on.
Okay. Thank you, David.
Okay. But I'll just leave for now.
With that, can we have a show of hands? I know we got, only Jason is not able to show his face. So Jason, you'll have to put your hand up, your emoji hand up with the bias. Wait a minute. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, we still have enough because Michael had to jump off. By a show of hands, how many are in favor of David staying on but recusing for the portions of budget and ED discussions? Okay, we have one that says he can stay on but recuse when we talk about certain topics. By a show of hands, how many would prefer that David recuse himself in everything until the decision is made on the ED? By a show of hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I didn't want to vote. I just, okay. So with that, it sounds as though we're going to need to ask David to, I don't want to say resign, John, or just to put him on pause. Is that what we call it?
A couple of things I'd like to just point out. Number one, That was only 5 votes, so you can't do anything with 5 votes.
Oh, it has to be 6?
Yes, and
Then I'm
number
6.
2, I'm not sure you have, as a board, the authority to force him to resign.
No,
I think,
to put him on pause.
what does that mean?
Madam Chair, if I could add to the conversation, it is a great opportunity to be a part of this board, but it's even more challenging to get the board off of the initial platform and to get going. So what I think I've heard is that David Green will continue to be a part of this board, but because the next 30 days are so fluid in terms of discussion regarding the budget, recruitment, and acquisition, maybe not as much acquisition, but there's a fluid conversation, and it is and we're trying to grapple with decisions that we will be living with for the next 4 years. So it is difficult to ask someone to be a part of, to move back, we'll call you. And I thought I'm just learning the names. I thought I heard, is it Rico?
Nico?
Say something similar. So we're not asking him, and we know that we don't have the authority to ask him to resign from the board. But what we are asking of him, in order to give him a fair shot, and it also to be fair to the candidates who will not be privy to these discussions, that we are consciously asking him to not participate in the next series of discussions until we get for certain the job description done and the budget done, because that gives them access to information. And again, we want the credibility and the integrity of this board to stay as fresh as it is as we go forward. So that's what I would say, Madam Chair.
And I agree. And what I don't want is to have undue scrutiny from stakeholders.
Correct.
That it was an inside, it was inside, it was already pre-planned. And I'm trying to stay away from that. And that happens quickly. But Jason, just before, I just want to hear, John, if you have any comment to what Ms. Estella stated.
Well, I guess all I would say is have a clear motion that's on the table and be specific about what it is that you're voting on.
I'm just asking that we're gonna, just like he offered to recuse himself from the meeting, that we ask him to just, I'm saying put on pause. I'm sure there's a better term for that, but just to put on pause. I know that takes our board down to 10 members. And
I think what you're it sounds like you're asking for some type of temporary suspension. I mean, when you say put on pause, what does that include? What does that limitation involve? Right?
Well, I would recommend to phrase this the other way around. It's not about him, it's about the others, it's about the whole hiring process. And nobody should have an unfair advantage in the hiring process by having participated in a number of discussions that only members can participate in and the outside world would not necessarily know. And so that is, I think, the criterion that we are using here is to have a clean hiring process. And then from that follows that he would not participate in discussions that are intertwined with hiring.
And Madam Chair,
That's
I would just,
correct.
I agree.
I was just going to say real quick, I agree, even to when we're talking about property and acquisition, he still would know more that the other candidates would not know about how we're moving forward. And that's my concern in reference to that. And Jason, to you, you're asking a question that is, as it has been stated, is messy. Here we are, third meeting in, and we're dealing with what do you call it, putting a monkey wrench into the process that we don't need. And we don't have, unfortunately, Michael dropped off, and we don't have Rainier and Miss Dawn. So I just think that this is crucial, and I don't want to mess it up so early on. Yes, Miss Estella.
Madam Chair, I agree with you, and I agree with what Claus Phillipson has just said. I think it is what it takes me to is the ethics training that we just completed. And we don't want to infringe upon that. I believe we want to start with a clean board of integrity. And then I would put the challenge to the attorney, the county attorney in this meeting to make the justification, the rationale, the appropriate language to make this happen to meet the board's request.
So again, I would caution you against having a blanket pause of his participation, because theoretically there are things that may come up that may not relate to the budget and may not relate to the ED position that he as a board member would and should be entitled to participate in. However, if something comes up that has a potential to create a conflict, he should recuse himself and he should leave the room. And it is messy, but I think, you know, the moment something like that comes up, he can drop off or leave the room if it's an in-person meeting. And I mean, if he's willing to go about it a different way and say, I'm not going to come to any meetings for the next 6 months, because it's going to take a while, I would think, before somebody's hired. I mean, you're talking probably multiple meetings, and asking him or requiring him to abstain from participating, I don't think you've got the ability to do that unless he agrees.
So we don't have the authority to require it, but we can ask, and he could, correct?
Yeah, sure. Okay. And that's probably the best place to start. Maybe bring him back and have a conversation about it, see what he's willing to do to address this, because it is, I mean, it's a tricky situation that he is creating, and hopefully he'd be willing to come to some sort of a solution that works for everybody.
Is that something we need to put in writing for the record, or as opposed to just bringing him back and having this conversation?
Well, first of all, I don't think it needs to necessarily be determined now. That's up to you. If, assuming there's a quorum, and if somebody makes the motion and there's a vote, that's your prerogative as the board. All I can do is advise, and what I would suggest is to run it by him, make sure he's okay with whatever you all decide, and if he's not, then and you all feel differently about it, you can certainly address it at the meeting. And
okay, so the
somebody can make a motion and have a vote, as long as it's not contrary to anything in the code or in the charter. If it passes by 6 votes, it passes.
So technically, we aren't meeting as a full board until April 30. The 2 committees that need to meet between now and then, he's not on. So how about we hold off? We make sure that everybody of the board members that were not here today, they have to be at that meeting on the 30th. So we can have, and we understand that because of schedules, and this was last minute, but we have to have everybody at that meeting on the 30th of April. And before we go into having conversations with the planning department, that we take this up, and the fact that it's going to be an in-person meeting, I think makes it that much more important.
Okay.
Yes, Claus.
Unfortunately, on the 30th, I will be out of the country, and I have booked a time away from the 23rd to the 2nd of May, and so that I cannot change at this point.
No problem. We have noted your position, at least for tonight. And we'll take that into, is that something, John, that we would need a proxy if needed, or no?
That's a good question. I don't know if there's a provision to vote by proxy, but I'll look into that.
There wasn't one listed, but you know.
Yeah, I don't know what the default is on that. I'll get back
Okay.
to you on that. But
Okay.
I'm looking at the county code, and I know you said you didn't think it was a removal, but I want to read what the code says about removing a member. It's only upon cause, and it has to be done by the county executive or the affirmative vote of the majority of the county council. And if you're asking somebody to take a 6-month potentially suspension and not participate at all, arguably that's removal. So that's my concern.
Gotcha.
But maybe, if he's okay with it and he's on board and he wants to be the executive director, I would assume he's probably going to want to work with you all on this and figure out a solution. So hopefully there's a way that everybody can sort of be in agreement and he can volunteer that.
Any information you can provide us before the April 30th meeting, or I'll actually say before April 23rd for Claus's sake, before he leaves town, that would be great. Okay. And that includes that David needs to know as well. You know, he needs to know what the parameters are as well. Okay. Anything else before what I wanted to ask was, now Kyle, your group for budget, I have you, Estella. I'm sorry, yeah, you, Wendy, Jason, Estella. For recruitment, Wendy, I have Michael, Nico, and Estella. And even though we have a chair, Claus, your committee is David, Jason, and Nico. But right now, I don't think you all can talk if you wish, but it's not prudent between now and April 30. Well, 2 weeks, I should say. And so if you could get with Tucker to let him know what the dates are for each committee. Tucker, if you could turn around and tell all of us who's meeting on what date, because somebody might decide they, may want to join, like me. Pop into both of them. That would be great. Also, to get it out to everybody, because those who were not here tonight, they would need to know the committees and, who's on it and when they're meeting, that as well. Yes, Claus?
Yeah, as you pointed out earlier, there is this connection between what the acquisition committee does and what the presentation on the 30th will be. And so the only thing that we could usefully do between now and then as a committee would be to ask certain specifics from Mr. Lafferty to present. And is that something we can do informally by just sharing emails and then send it on to Mr. Lafferty instead of having a formal meeting, or is this not possible?
I think we can send an email, everyone send what they would like to Tucker. Like Jason, he made a question, a suggestion. If we have specific information that we want Mr. Lafferty to discuss, then we can give all that information to Tucker, and then Tucker can give it to Mr. Lafferty. Some he may be able to share with us, some he may not be able to. Some, like the master plan, if anybody wants it. And I don't know if we need it for the whole county as much as for West Baltimore. If he should be able to share that with us via email. And then, point to specific topics or sections within the West Baltimore master plan that relate to this catchment area. I think that would be helpful, and we can read up on that before our meeting on the 30th. Yes, no, maybe?
Yeah, so just to clarify, I mean, obviously the master plan is online and we can read on that, and I did that already. But the background question was, what led to the specific node designations, and that is some data compilation that they did in the planning department that is not necessarily online, and that's what I was having in mind as my question for Mr. Lafferty.
So yeah, if you could put that in an email to Tucker, then yeah, because you're right, that's specific. Yes, and then Tucker can pass that on. Yes, Madam Vice Chair.
Madam Chair, I just have a question because I'm not as familiar with the county structure. Will Mr. Lafferty and the planning department include in this presentation information on on future housing developments? I know we are talking a great deal about commercial, retail, and industrial development, but is his department the source to include a dialogue about housing?
So the planning department will have some information on that, but we have the Department of Housing and Community folks is more specifically on that. I think what I would ask Estella is, you know, you can have a request like that, similar to how Carla described. Sorry about the dog in the background. Making a request to the planning department. If you could do the same thing for DHCD housing, then that could be a subsequent presentation. Yeah.
That would be great. The Madam Chair, that would be my recommendation.
And I agree, absolutely. We can put that in that would be the next one. And then after housing, and it depends because I don't know if we'll need a whole meeting for housing, but I think the third one should be public safety.
Yes, ma'am.
And because we got the commercial, we got the residential, how does public safety play into the catchment area?
Okay.
And then and woven in that, I would suggest between Jason and Dawn, because they're in charge of community associations, that we would get their input to make sure if there's any particular questions that they want to have answered from those three agencies.
Okay.
So Tucker, if you don't mind, could you email Dawn or communicate with her if she has any particular questions she wants to have raised with housing, and I'm sorry, first with planning and then with housing, and after. Okay, thank you. Yes, Claus.
Sorry, I just wanted to clarify that the housing strategy really rides on the fact that so many commercial areas are not functioning very well, and that a large part of the housing strategy is to reuse commercial areas that are underperforming for mixed use. So we just need to be careful that we don't silo these things too much, because I think that is the vision, that these commercial areas underperforming become mixed use areas that respond to housing and services and commercial activity all at once.
Well, I do know we have two experts, both our Madam Vice Chair Estella and Wendy are active in the housing department, and I would just ask that that you all continue to give us your professional insight into that and understanding. And I think once we hear from the housing department, these two ladies will know, those pointed questions to ask. And it does tie back into commercial. And I think that's why Miss Estella was asking for a meeting with housing, understanding, that background. Am I correct, ladies?
Yes, ma'am. Miss Wendy says yes too.
I know she plays in it every day.
Yes.
Okay. Is there any other, was that the last item on our agenda?
Madam Chair, the next item is new business, if there is any new business, and then public comment.
We don't have anyone from the public on the call, do we? Okay. No. And there's the new business is getting us for the chairs to get with Tucker on the dates and your committees on a date to meet. And then I think we go from there. Is there any, Samir, do you have anything to add before we depart?
No, I don't. I know this feels a little clunky, but this is really like the building block work that is tough at the beginning. But I'm glad to see you guys engaging in it, making progress. So thanks again for the time you're investing.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Jason.
Madam Chair, my concerns. I'm still very curious about the vision and the strategy of our approach. What are we driving towards? What are we trying to accomplish? I'm not hearing a lot of that kind of really being talked about. We're talking about a number of different things that I think relevant and associated, but I'm not hearing, hey, what should our approach be? What's our strategy? What is our vision? And what exactly are we actually trying to accomplish? Um, it doesn't have to be tonight, but I wanted to make that, heard that I, at some point we really need to get to that. Even if it's at a basic level and not necessarily shoot the nuts and deep, but we need to start to establish, hey, where are we driving towards? That's what I wanted to say.
So with that, I'm going to, I'm one of those 5% on the problem, 95% on the solution. So one of the things I would ask, even if you've read it once, to read again the purpose behind establishing the redevelopment authority. That was the first, second, and third readers that came out of the state legislative body, to read the full execution of the charter. I'm sorry, yeah, the charter and the resolution, because it says what we're supposed to do. Now, is it finite in its description? No, it is not. But that's the framework from which we will start. My homework assignment for you is that you give us what it is that you see that you would like, that's a priority for you. And technically that should be for all of us, is based on the framework that was given. Then what do we look at? What do we consider the priorities, the mission, the vision within the framework that was given? And that way we come in and we're having a strategic planning meeting, which is separate and apart from what we've been doing thus far. My concern about talking about that right now is that you have to do a forensic analysis first of where the county is, what we have today before we can go forward, which is why we're having the meetings with the planning department, with the housing department, and then with public safety. Because we can sit up here and talk about that we want the Taj Mahal, but if there's no parcels to have the Taj Mahal, if that means we run into eminent domain to build the Taj Mahal, and if it means we don't have the public facilities, not necessarily just police, but fire, waste material, we need to know what we have to work with before we can move forward. And that's why we're asking these county agencies to come in and speak with us. I'm looking to like you're on camera, but that's the purpose of having the conversations. What has been done thus far? What are the plans so that we don't cross swords with county? And then we can talk about how we want to move forward. And with that, I think, Claus, you had your hand up first.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said, but I also wanted to support Jason's move that we need to embellish this somewhat, because if I recall this enabling law correctly, and I looked this over again before we met the first time, and also the county bill, it is setting the formal framework, but it does not have a lot of content in it, in the sense of, like many bills start with whereas, and then it enumerates a whole bunch of findings and facts, and then it is resolved that. And these bills are pretty strong on what it is resolved to do in terms of a formal framework. It is not very strong in the analysis, and some of that we will get now. And as you pointed out right now, that is the very first step. But I would certainly agree that we need to have a sort of content discussion so that everybody gets really a good sense when the neighbor says, well, you're on this authority, what are they actually doing, that we have like this 5-second elevator speech ready, and really fully that flows in our blood, that we understand what we are really trying to do. And I think we are not
absolutely
at that point.
Right. And I do agree. I just want to make sure that we aren't putting that cart before the horse. And that's why we want to have the conversations with the agencies. Yes, Wendy, you had your hand up.
Yeah,
No?
just really quickly. Agreed. We do need to make sure that we have the substantive information that's necessary. right? For us to make sure that we're clear on what we're doing as a board. But I also want to just offer that it is also important for us to understand what our role is as a board. So we may want to consider board training, right? Because there is a relationship that will be between us and our executive director. And we should be clear on what role each one of us is playing and how we will interact with one another. Just want to offer that.
And I strongly agree. And I also, even what our role is with the county, I'm grateful for Tucker and for John and for Samir, but we even need to know, and I know that's part of it is ethics training, but we also, I think, I would also ask that we have a session that talks about the line delineation between the authority and the county, because we've asked a couple of times, what can we receive or not receive or information. And so if it's possible that we can get something like a standard operating, like a SO, something so that we know you can ask us for this, but not that. You're responsible for this, and that as well. And that is good for the board so that we even know what that ED, because I read some things in there about what the ED could, hire people, he can hire all of that stuff. And all of that is important. Well, I'm sorry, to Jason's point, we need to know what that mission and vision is and what we're going to do before that ED comes on board as well. So all of it, but I'm really trying to go an ABC 1, 2, 3. And so with Jason, back to your request, you're asking, but I'm also asking you to give us specific points of what you believe should be priorities to you. Same thing for everyone here. Because we all came here, we were all selected based on our qualifications, and all of them need to be taken into consideration. So not that it would be nice if we could get that from everyone well before the 30th, and then maybe even between Tucker and I, we could put it in a package to say, these are the things that are important to us, and then have that discussion. But that depends on everybody, giving us your input.
That sounds
Does that
very
help?
good.
Does that help, Jason, at all?
Yeah, very, very helpful. I appreciate it,
Okay.
and I appreciate all the other comments that were made. So,
Madam Chair,
I'm just going to say this. I'm sorry, John. Jason, when something like that burns at you, and like you say, I'm going to keep bringing it up, that means that you got something. So I want what it is that you got, because you keep bringing it up, and I'm not discounting it. I just know that it needs to come out. You need to tell us, because it's a burn for you. And so if you can tell us, then we know how to move forward as a group. Yes, John.
So I'm sorry, I just wanted to say that as far as county employees, we're here to support the authority. It's on an interim basis, and it's at your request. So when hopefully you get to the point where you don't need us anymore, but that's up to you all.
Okay, so we can just keep holding your hand until you say, go away, grasshopper.
We will do as much or as little as you like. Just let us know, and we're here to support you.
Thank you. Yes, Madam Vice Chair.
Madam Chair, I would just offer for consideration, because I think this would help me in answering the question that Jason raised and also that you spoke to. And that is, after the 3 presentations of the planning department, the housing community development department, and public sector, it would give me a set of data and information that would help to crystallize and better articulate what are maybe some basic thoughts about the vision. And I do, that's one. And then 2, I do believe that the vision will become clearer as we are more comfortable with the information that's already out there, and it is likely to change or be more articulate or clearer in its articulation. And then my third point, Madam Chair, is to make sure that when these committees are formed, that the prerequisite data that we ask for be submitted to the chairs to share with us as these committees come together in the next week or 2.
Yes, ma'am. That's why I asked when the committee chairs, when you're deciding what your dates and everything are, that you submit that to Tucker and myself and the Madam Vice Chair, so we all know. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And thank you. Anyone else have anything they'd like to state or contribute? Nico?
I have nothing, Madam Chair. Thank you for the recognition.
Thank you. Okay, is there any other last words before we close? Yes, Kyle.
Madam Chair, since my committee is under a time constraint, I would like to know their availability over the next 4 to 5 days. And that will be Wendy, Estella, Madam Vice Chair, Jason, as far as the next couple of days, if they're available to meet.
Yes, I can speak to mine. I am actually out of town and untethered from Thursday to Monday, unfortunately. But I'm willing to be flexible before that or, work to catch up after that. But I know Thursday to Monday, I am out of pocket, sir.
Okay, no problem. No worries. Thank you.
And Mr. Kyle, I would certainly, this is a strange day to give up, but I'm willing to give up a Friday. I have some flexibility more in the day than in the evenings as the calendar is filled in, but I can certainly work through whatever window you want on Friday, which is the 4th.
And Wendy,
my evenings are flexible. Friday evening is a little not as good for me. I could do I have some flexibility maybe around around lunchtime. I might have some flexibility on Friday, but the rest of the week in the evenings I might be all right.
Okay, thank you.
Available.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Well, one good thing, we have everybody's email and phone number, so. With that, thank you all very much for your time and your attention and your participation, your questions and suggestions. This has been really, I think this was a good, meaty conversation. I wanted to circle around one more time for Claire, because we talked about so much. What is the step we want to take with David Green? Are we going to ask him? Or are we going to wait until right before the 4th? Even if we wait until the April 30th meeting, what's the direction? Is it to ask him, or is it to put it? We're going to wait to hear from John in reference to the you can and you can't.
I can certainly lay out, if you want a short email about it, I'm happy to do that. But my advice would be just to call him, or we can do that for you and see, maybe he has some thoughts on how to handle this.
Ask if you all could do that to keep all of, yeah, I'm chair, but I'm still a board member. And I would rather that come from the county, John, with the piece of, there's nothing that says that we can make you resign. There's nothing that says about, and this is new and it's different. And I'd rather it come from an objective place than to come from one of us board members that have that initial conversation, if that's okay.
That's fair. Tucker, why don't you and I plan on calling him?
Yeah, that sounds good.
When you're free.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Very much appreciate your time. Have a great weekend. What's today? Monday. I'm sorry. Have a great one day left of the month. And then tomorrow we're in the second quarter. So, woo. But thank you so very much. I appreciate it. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Oh, I'm
Good night
sorry.
all.
Meeting adjourned.
I second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Good night.